Today's speaker is Russell Libby. You probably know that Russell has been MOFGA's executive director for a long, long time. You can probably also guess that Russell divides his time between Unity, Augusta, Washington, D.C., and just about anywhere else that food systems, agricultural policy, and farming are on the agenda. You might also know that Russell is a delightful and very readable poet. But when I was asked to introduce Russell, I wanted to tell you something that you might not know. I was fortunate to spend 2 years as president of MOFGA's board. There are many wonderful things about that experience, but one stands out above them all. For 2 years, I either met with Russell or talked to him on the phone at least 5 days a week, sometimes 6, and sometimes 7. We met with donors. We schemed. We strategized. We hung out. We went on trips. We attended dinners. I was made to feel like Russell's best friend in the world. A part of me knew, of course, that I wasn't his best friend, that he had lots of good friends, but still, I felt like literally his best friend. Now years have passed, and a few presidents later, he and I don't talk on the phone quite so often. My role at MOFGA is more on the periphery. Now others work more closely with Russell than I. Though we are still good friends, great friends I would say, I now realize what I had suspected was true. When you are with Russell, you do feel like you are his best friend. Whether you are a farmer, or a MOFGA staffer, or a new member, or an old member, or a wealthy donor, or a not so wealthy donor, or an apprentice, or a politician, or even a young person, when you are with him, you feel like you are his best friend. And for that moment in time, you are. I'd like to suggest that each of you sign up to be board president of MOFGA. It's only a 2-year commitment. You get to know this really incredible institution, and you get to spend a lot of time with Russell. But if you can't do that, and if you can't find some other way to worm your way into his life, just know that MOFGA is being guided and led by a brilliant, compassionate, thoughtful, and yes, loving man. A real gem. So here he is, MOFGA's own executive director, Russell Libby.
Well, I knew John could do a lot of things. I didn't know he could both bring and shut off the rain, so thank you for that. I was thinking, first, it's such an honor to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. It's 35 pairs for me and for a lot of you as well. And I plan to be here next year too, and we'll come back to that eventually. So there's so much that's good and powerful that's happening around us right here, right now. Last month, MOFGA celebrated his 40th birthday. Thank you to all of you. And it's so amazing to me to see the circles of how things are happening, that people who start in one role change over time. Somewhere back here, I see the person who started MOFGA's apprenticeship program a long time ago. You may know her better as Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, kind of wave from the corner. And one of the things that's been striking me about this fair is how many people are kind of flipping into second generation roles. So yeah, the early volunteers, but the kids are the volunteers. And in some cases, the grandkids of the early volunteers are showing up here and playing important roles, and it's that full circle that's so important, and why we're here today. But I have to say that I think the challenges that we've gone through are nothing compared to the challenges that are ahead of us, that we're going to have to be facing in the years ahead. And that's what I'd like to talk about for, I think I've got the time to about 27 minutes. Let's see how we do it. Yeah, no, I'm not that precise. We're all part of one big interconnected web of life. And every once in a while some quote goes past my eyes and it just becomes part of how I think about the world. And I know that's the same for you. Robert Coffin, who was a Maine poet, lived in Harpswell, taught at Bowdoin for a long time, somewhere back on my mother's side, a distant relative. I haven't bothered to figure that out. We eat from the earth, the sky, the water. Barry Commoner, and I don't know how many of you were at the Common Ground Fair in 1980, Litchfield in the grandstands, but Barry came and gave one of his rabble-rousing speeches. I had the honor of traveling around with him a lot that year, had a great time. The first law of ecology is that everything is related to everything else. And going back in time, John Muir, observer of the world, preserver of much of what is beautiful. When we tug at a single thing in nature, we find it attached to the rest of the world. And we all know that implicitly. We think about that. We think about the wholeness of it all, how all the pieces fit. And yet, it's not part of the political conversation or debate right now. It's not the conversation that we're having with our neighbors. There's so much anger out there, we have to find a way around the anger to solving problems. So it's up to us to figure out how to make the world look more like what Coffin and Commoner and Muir were talking about. And a few months ago, I was asked to write a little piece for the Maine Policy Journal, and I tried to imagine what would Maine look like if everything went well, if we did all that's possible on your farms and the surrounding countryside. Farmers in their fields checking on newborn calves, orchards in full bloom, alewives running up streams where they haven't been seen in generations, fishing fleets returning safely to harbors all along the coast, foods of the season in every home and store and restaurant because it's what's available, and these are the foods wanted and expected by all. That's the food system that we can have, that's the food system you're all building. This is where we need to be going. But we have a long ways to go because our shared responsibility, I think, is to leave this place better than we found it. And that's the opposite of so much of what's going on in the world right now. Not better from a corporate, make more money, hey, I got what I want, but a shared vision, a shared beauty, a place where we can all understand implicitly that what we're seeing is good. It's not about what's in our wallet, it's about what's in our heart, it's about what's around us. That sense of beauty, of pleasure in what we're doing each day is what's going to carry us forward through the difficult time. So I want to go back to Coffin's three themes, the earth. We eat from the earth. To me that's so obvious, and yet we don't eat from the chemical factory, we don't eat from the fertilizer factory, we eat from the earth, the soil that's beneath us right now. Paul Frederick, who was a UMaine soil scientist in the 1970s, told a story that I think is really profound. He talked about Aroostook County, caribou silt loam. So any of you who've been to Aroostook County know that that is the typical soil of northern Maine. And when it was first described, the A profile, the part that we think of, the deep dark brown, was 18 inches thick. So 18 inches of A profile was the original description of caribou silt loam. Frederick went back to those fields where they mapped that 100 years later, and not only was the 18 inches of A profile gone, the B profile was gone, and ledges were outcropping in some of those typical fields. So where's that soil? That soil is gone. It's gone forever. It's gone in a geological sense. It's in the Bay of Fundy. It's not going to be there. We can't use it. How do we make up for it? When I go to your farms, and look around, I see this, by the way, the timing is great, because both the time this page starts to get saturated and wrinkled, I'm done with it. I got this just about right here. So somewhere, we can see the power of building soil, of what happens when there's the true conservatism, the care and caution that says we can't forego the future for the sake of today. And we need that everywhere. We need it in Aroostook County, we need it in Waldo County, we need it in Kennebec County, we need that soil. Pesticides. It's straightforward, isn't it? Rachel was right, Rachel Carson was right, Rachel was right. We can kind of stop right there, but we're going to go forward. Next year, it's 50 years since Silent Spring, and how can we be continuing to poison the earth? Because to me, it's that simple. Rachel Carson was right. And 15 years ago, the U.S. Geological Service did an analysis of rainfall in the spring. Every rainfall in New England had measurable amounts of atrazine. And since, luckily, atrazine's a pretty not friendly pesticide. Even the dairy farmers who were using it in Maine didn't want to use it and moved away from it. So since everybody's moved to Roundup Ready corn and soybeans across the Midwest, and so what does the U.S. Geological Service announce last month? Every stream in Mississippi that was sampled, every air sample in Mississippi, every stream sample in Iowa had Roundup in it. And Roundup is this supposedly benign pesticide that binds with the soil and doesn't go anywhere and doesn't have any health impact. Well, that's obviously wrong. There are little glimmers. That is, farmers don't spray on Monday just because it's Monday and they're flipping the calendar. People are a lot more cautious and careful and thinking. But we really need a wholesale, large investment in biological research so we can move out of this treadmill. I'm not going to waste much time talking about GMOs, other than to say the incredible arrogance of that industry is showing up in Roundup-resistant weeds, in corn rootworm that's now resistant to the BT that's there. Many of us, MOFGA, organic associations, environmental organizations, knew this, said this 20 years ago. It was totally ignored. We have to present real alternatives. And we're so lucky to have FETCO and Johnny's and so many of you who are out there saving seeds every day, because that's what's going to make the difference in the end. We eat from the sky that reaches miles above where we stand, that envelops the earth. Coffin was an avid hunter, so he was thinking about the game birds that were flying past us blind. But we really do eat from the air, from the sky, from the nitrogen cycle, the water cycle. We also eat from the bad parts too. The mercury coming from coal-fired power plants, the reality we live in a world filled with toxics and that those toxics are circulating in the air continuously around the planet. I've been tested and I know that. You know that implicitly. The radioactive reality is we're also breathing some small amount of Fukushima each day, and we're going to for the rest of our lives, and we can go back in time. There's no away. We are the away. We have to figure out how to stop creating the problems. We eat from the water. Remember, 70% of our bodies are water. Without clean, fresh drinking water, we're gone. Without a healthy marine ecosystem, there's no seafood. In terms of the historic abundance that was present when my family came to Maine, which is a long time ago now, it's gone. The Pew Charitable Trust just came out with a study on the potential for seafood in Maine. And even their study says we can do much better, but we can do much better by going back to like a 1970 degraded ecosystem. What would it look like if we had a ecosystem that looked something like it did in 1600 in terms of the diversity of fish and food that we could harvest? We shut off the flows from river to sea. We can fix that. The great work the Penobscot Nation and the Penobscot River Trust is doing is an example of what we can do. And we also know, in terms of water, that if we get too much, it's not good. This is just about right, actually. Much of the Connecticut River got 20 inches during a 4-week stretch in late August into September. When weather becomes unstable, as the world warms, our weather systems become unstable as well. What are we to do? Well, you're here because of the possibilities, and actually, I would say this entire fair is here because it is a possibility. It is a way that we could move. It is a possible future. But I have a few ideas, a short laundry list, and then the hard ones. So short laundry list, Earth Day, every day. Why are we only having one day a year when we think that this is important? Yes, bend over and pick up the trash, but also let's stop and figure out how we can prevent the trash from being created in the first place. Organic and local. Certified organic, yes, MOFGA is the oldest certified organic certification program in the country, 1972. Few of us have been at it for a long time here. Independent cantankerous organic, that may be even a longer lasting strain here in Maine. That too, but not in a way that undermines our neighbors. Let's undermine the corporate approach to the food system instead. It's a much more productive way to spend our time. Michael Abelman, who's a really gifted photographer and farmer, did a book of markets around the world, of essays, of pictures, and he stopped and talked with an African woman about agriculture. And at the end of the conversation, she turns to Michael and she goes, "You mean you eat food from people you don't know?" And I think that was a really powerful question to me. You know, I wrote that down a long time ago, and I kind of keep it in my head because how can we really have a strong, viable local economy? How can we have a strong food system if we're eating stuff and we don't have the smallest clue who produced it or under what conditions, how the people were treated who did it? Migrant workers, the farmers themselves, the land. If you don't know the farmer, you need to know and trust the person in between. But we need to tighten that up. That's the easy one, number two. And Maine and organic. I'm part with some other people who are here of some big conversations about what does the future of New England's food system look like? What capacity do we have? And we're having a really interesting fight. Do we have the ability to produce 80% of our calories? Well, actually, Maine does. Does New England? It's kind of tenuous. We need a real fisheries. We need a lot more land in production. When we look at where that's going to happen, it's Maine. We have 3,500 miles of shorefront, of ocean front. We have millions of acres of farmland that were in production in Maine, are not in production in Maine, could be in production in Maine, and you're the ones who are going to make that happen. You'll notice I included that in a list of easy things to do because I'm convinced that 50 years from now, everybody's going to be looking back at this point in time and just amazed at the progress that's been made and how we all rebuilt the kind of food system that we wanted to have happen. Yeah, you can do that. That way I can breathe and take a drink of water. So if those are the easy things, what are the hard ones? Well, one is maybe that we should think about putting the public health first. The Hippocratic Oath translates roughly to first do no harm. We need a new health system that isn't about medical care after the fact, but working towards making all of us healthy people in every way. Yeah. It definitely starts with what we eat, but it goes far beyond that. Many of you know that I'm deep in a personal journey through the medical system, and I'm really appreciative of all the skills that the doctors and nurses, and I've had the occasion to visit with many of them over the past year, and continue to do that. But there's been almost no interest in the traditional medical system in my story and how I came, since last year's fair, to be diagnosed with cancer twice, multiple surgeries, chemotherapy, hence no beard and none of you recognizing me. But I'm doing really well, and I'm okay with my personal place, but I'm thinking about the bigger pieces also. I was born in a paper mill town, sulfur plant process. I raked blueberries in fields that were still in the back end of the DDT era. I grew up working around a golf course, spreading diazinon, using organophosphates, exposed to those on a continual basis. Many of you know that I was part of the body burden study a few years ago when 15 Maine citizens were tested for the chemicals in their bodies. And everybody was kind of surprised that I ranked high on things like fire retardants, the chemicals that are in carpets. We don't have any carpets in our house. Just the entire range of modern American chemicals. My story is a personal story, but it's also your story. The medical system is doing everything after the fact. Health is not a personal issue. It's not only a personal issue, it's also a social issue. Cancer, diabetes, heart disease, these are systemic problems. We need to talk about them these days. And how do we start? We get toxics out of the system, out of the food system, out of the consumer product system, out of the environment in general. And that means we have to move to the precautionary principle with health as our standard. It will mean not just acknowledging that Rachel was right, but doing something about it, putting our money there, doing the political things we need to do to change the system. And we also have to acknowledge that life itself is a mystery. Why me? Why not you? Why the next person? We don't know the answers to that. Western medicine's great at fixing things that are broken. I'm really appreciative. But it's not so good at figuring out how to not break them in the first place. And so I'm so glad we have so many healers today. Deb and Athena, Gail Edwards, all the medicinal herb growers, and especially all the organic farmers. How can we be healthy if we're not eating good food every day of our lives, right from the beginning? And I've been fortunate to have at least bare bones medical insurance, but can you imagine having the choices that people have to make when they don't have any insurance? It's fundamentally wrong. We need national health insurance. Everybody should be able to go to the doctor. I don't know, I think I'm escalating in the difficulty, but I think that one's doable too. We just need to get going here. Energy, climate, they're so closely related, I'm not going to talk about them separately. John Seymour, who was the British Scott Nearing, wrote an apocalyptic novel at the end of his life about what happens in England when the oil runs out. It's not pretty. The hero, by the way, is an organic farmer named Bob. Any Bobs in the audience here? But Seymour had a name for the era that we're going through, the challenges this era that we've just gone through. He calls it the age of plunder. We've basically stolen the resources of millions of years and used them up in 150 years. Now we're going to have to figure out what to do next. Well, there's a cost to that. We now live in a world that's different from the one we were born in. It's warmer, it's wetter, it's less stable. Or if we live in Texas, it's hotter, it's drier, it's on fire. In Vermont, it's wetter, and then your prime river bottom land has gone downstream. A year ago, after the BP oil spill, I was discouraged. I know a lot of you were as well. What is it that we can do? Well, first, fundamentally, these are social issues. We need to tackle them through political action. Congress needs to have strong laws. We need strong regulation. We can't be poisoning the ocean for generations to come. And I also started thinking about what is it that I can do, and it's pretty small. But one thing I decided I could do was start taxing myself, a carbon tax. I figured Congress isn't going to pass one, but I can pass one myself right now. And I started taxing myself $1 a gallon for every time I stopped at the gas pump. And I looked the other day and I realized I've saved $800 in my carbon tax fund in the last year and a half, which says I drive too much. It's been going down lately, but $800 is my little piece that I'm going to put towards something to start taking us downward. And if more people did that, we'd have more money, we could pool it and do something bigger. So we don't really have to wait for the other people in Congress to do something, because I know Shelley's ready. But we have to figure out and show the way and lead. By the way, if you came in by the red barn, you saw 54 solar panels up there, and we just got the first month's bill, and it turns out that 11 months of the year, that's pretty much going to generate the electricity that we use here on site. So, there's where collective, where our money together can make a huge difference. But it's also not about new forms of energy. We're not going to produce more energy, and get our way out of the climate energy mess. We have to figure out ways to do less with what we have. To walk more, to share with one another, to support our neighbors, our friends, our communities. And we also have to realize that it's late. It's very late, and that Irene and all the changes we've seen are the tip of the iceberg. If you look at the studies for what Maine looks like 50 years from now, and the Casco Bay Estuary Project did a really good one of Portland up to Farmington, they were projecting for Farmington, Maine, in the foothills, to have at least 60 days over 90 degrees 50 years from now. So that is not what Farmington is like now. That's not what we want Farmington to be like in the future. We have to work our way out of it, one small step at a time, because there aren't any climate deniers in the middle of the Texas fires or in the middle of the Vermont floods, and we can't put up with that anymore. I said they're not getting easier. Jobs. Don't you think it would be really nice for people to have access to jobs when they want to work? And everywhere I go, all I see is possibilities. So John, who introduced me, had 5 apprentices this summer, and they were busy, busy, busy. And I know my small farm could keep 2 people busy full-time year-round. And I know every place you are, you have this long list of jobs that you'd like to do, and we're not able to do them because there's not enough money circulating back into the food system. There's not enough investment in local energy. There's not enough attention being paid to the jobs that are necessary right now. MOFGA's hired, since the new, quote, recession started, I think we've hired 7 or 9 new people. And I'll keep hiring as long as you keep getting members in here, and we'll make that all happen. But we need to think about full employment. We need foresters, we need timber framers, we need stonemasons, we need people who are going to put solar panels on everybody's roof. We need to find our way out of this mess. There's work to be done, and I have one idea of how we can pay for a chunk of it, and that would be to stop the wars now. Yeah. We're spending upwards of $1 billion supporting those continuing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's $1 billion that's being sucked out of our economy continuously. $1 billion close to a day, if I remember. It doesn't matter. We've spent so much money, it's wasted. What are we going to do? Again, it's up to all of us. We have to find a way to stop the charade and bring everyone home. And put them to work. Because bringing them home and having nothing for everyone to do is just a totally non-productive place to be, too. There's so much to be done. And if this sounds somewhat political, it is. I jumped in a few years ago to the food safety debate, and I was amazed at how much power the voice of one individual can have. Yeah, I've had a few years of doing some of this work, and I can think and present good arguments, but so can you. We need your voices, all of your voices, not just me once in a while going down to Washington talking, but a lot of voices speaking up continuously. Augusta, it's really lonely at the Ag Committee sometimes. We would like to have you there. Serve in town government, serve in state government. We do have a few organic farmers in the legislature. We could use a lot more. We could also vote yes on one on election day and keep Maine's tradition of open voting access. Let's not be cynical. Let's not be cynical. Let's figure out why they want to be cynical and cut off people from voting. It's because they don't really like the way they vote. Let's just be honest about it. So that's most of the rant, I think. Now we'll go into the fun part. So today's a day for us all to celebrate and eat and drink the beauty of the earth, the sky, the water. We're all sharing in this beauty, and we need to pause to acknowledge it. It's here, it's around us, it's here every day. We also need to be thinking about what it is that we're going to do for this larger whole, how we can make things happen. One person is powerful, 2 is more. We are the start of a movement. We've been the start of a movement for a long time. We have to move it forward. And I think about the garden parade that went around about a half hour before I started talking. All those kids, they're trusting in us to do the right thing. They aren't saying, oh, well, you were busy. There's no excuses here. It's up to us to do the right thing all the time, not just when it's convenient for us. And to me, that's what MOFGA's been about for the past 40 years. That's what we need to live and do right to our last breaths. We can make it happen. We will make it happen. Thank you. Everybody's shy except me up here.
So, on behalf of dozens, but we'll say hundreds of MOFGA friends and fans and Russell Libby fans, I want to present on behalf of MOFGA this card to Russell. And if you haven't had a chance to sign it, come on up afterwards and you can sign it too. So one more hand for Russell here.
I think there's a quick announcement on Moving Planet. So John, somewhere nearby?
Very nearby.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm John Zavadny. Oh no, I think you do a fine job. John Zavadny, Director of the Center for Environmental Arts and Humanities at Unity College, and I would like to invite you to join thousands of your closest Common Ground friends right behind you here at the Commons area at 3:30. We've got a lift back there by that tiny little tree. We're going to go up in the sky. We're going to take a picture and put it on 350.org. 350 is the climate change group led by Bill McKibben. 350 parts per million is the amount of carbon that we can safely maintain in our atmosphere and keep living. We're now at about 392, 393. So this is a climate change action. We've got local organic pumpkins over there that we got from the Reentry Center in Swanville. They're going to walk through the 350 with us. Y'all are going to raise them high in the sky, supporting local agriculture, moving Maine, and then those pumpkins are going to go to the Volunteer Regional Food Pantry. So be right back here at 3:30. Thank you.
One last thing, Russell will be right down here at this picnic table. Would like to say hello to you. We also will have books of his poetry, and if you haven't read it, you're in for a big treat, and he'll be signing books of poetry. So come on right over here and say hello to Russell in just a minute or two.
Yes. And last word from me, and thank you everybody, that's so nice, is that we have cards on how you can get involved, circulating and up here at the table. So enjoy the fair.